Welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about solving equations with variables on both sides, but with fractions today. Our content objective is students will be able to solve equations that have variables on both sides of the equations with fractions. Our language objective is students will be able to state the mathematical properties used when solving equations. And why am I learning this? Well, it's important for real-world problems like finding out which cell phone plan is a better deal. So let's recall from our previous lesson what happened when we ended up with a false statement. Remember, if we end up with a false statement, our answer is going to be no solution. Okay. Then there was another case. There was a case where we ended up with a true statement. With a true statement, our answer is going to be infinitely many solutions. So just keep that in mind, because those are the only two types that are different, other than the fact that you solving an answer, getting like x equals 3, that's a one solution. So let's go ahead and jump in straight to our very first example. The first thing I noticed in this problem is I can distribute. So I'm going to go ahead and write 1/5 x, that's going to stay the same, plus 9/10 equals, well, negative 1/3 times negative 3/1. I basically made it into a fraction. I notice these cross cancel, leaving me with a positive 1x. Now, do you need to put that 1? No, but if it helps, definitely do that. Then I have a negative 1/3 times the positive 3/5. I notice the 3's cross cancel, which leaves me with negative 1/5 negative 1/5. Now I do notice I have variables on both sides. I do want to isolate it to one side, so I'm going to go ahead and subtract 1x from both sides. So I'm going to have 1/5 minus 1. I'm going to make it into a fraction by putting it over 1. 5 is going to be my lowest common multiple. That doesn't change, but this one will have to change by 5. It's going to leave you with negative 4/5. X plus 9/10 equals negative 1/5. Not quite done yet. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of my constant by subtracting 9/10 from both sides, leaving me with negative 4/5 x. Oof, can't forget our sign. Do more side work. Negative 1/5 minus 9/10. Lowest common multiple is 10. We're going to multiply by 2. Multiply by 2. Negative 1 times 2 is negative 2. The 9 is going to stay the same because it's already a denominator of 10, leaving me with negative 11/10. Now, this is a step where we typically get rid of our coefficient by dividing both sides by negative 4/5. I do want to introduce another method as well. What we could do instead is multiply by the reciprocal. Notice when we multiply by the reciprocal, the sign doesn't change, so I'm still going to multiply by a negative number. So I'm going to take the reciprocal and make it 5/4. Now, why is this nice? Because here you'll notice the 5's will cross cancel and the 4's will cross cancel. And the negative times a negative is a positive, which just leaves me with x. If I multiply this side by negative 5/4, I'm going to do the same on this side. I'll notice here negative times a negative is a positive. And then I'm going to cross reduce. 10 and 5 have 5 in common. 5 divided by 5 is 1. 10 divided by 5 is 2, leaving me with an answer of positive 11/8 as my final answer. Now, we'll quickly, to justify all of my steps, I'm going to backtrack and explain all of my properties that were being used. For the first one, I used the distributive property. For the second one, I subtracted, so I was using the subtraction property of equality. And the next step, I subtracted again, so again, I used the subtraction property of equality. And on this side, I actually multiplied both sides, so that's actually using the multiplication property of equality. And those were all of my justifications for the steps I did for number 1. Okay, so now at this point, I'd like you to pause the video and try number 2 by yourself. Okay, so for number 2, the very first thing I notice I can do is distribute. So I'm going to go ahead and keep this the same. Negative 3/10 x plus 2/5 equals, I'm going to go ahead and distribute negative 1/4 times 2. I am going to put it over 1. I notice I can cross reduce by 2, leaving me with a negative 1/2. So here we have negative 1/2 x plus, now I'm going to distribute a negative 1/4. with a positive 1/5. I can't cross reduce, but I can multiply straight across, leaving me with a negative 1/20th. So I'm going to go ahead and change this to just minus 1/20th. At this stage, I notice I have variables on both sides, so I'm going to go ahead and add it to the left side to isolate it to the left. This is going to cross cancel. I'm going to do some side work. We have negative 3/10 plus 1/2. 10 is going to be our lowest common multiple. Notice the 10 is already 10, so this negative 3 is not going to change. But this one is going to have to change by a 5. So 1 times 5 is 5, leaving you with 2/10, which can be reduced to 1/5. Whenever possible, I highly suggest you reduce your fractions. That way your numbers are smaller. So now I'm left with a positive 1/5 x plus 2/5 equals negative 1/20th. I'm going to move my constant over to the right by subtracting 2/5 from both sides. So here I'm left with a 1/5 x equals, now here I'm going to do negative 1/20th minus 2/5. The lowest common multiple is going to be a 20, so the first one's not going to change. However, the second one's going to have to change by a 4. So that's going to be minus 8, so leaving me with negative 9/20. Just like before, in the previous example, we're going to try something new. Instead of dividing by the coefficient, we're going to practice multiplying by the reciprocal of our coefficient. So the reciprocal of our coefficient is going to be 5/1. So notice the 5's cancel out, the 1's cancel out, leaving me with just x. So I'm going to multiply this side by 5/1 as well. So 5 and 20 both have a 5 in common, so this is a 1. This becomes a 4. Negative 9 and 1 don't have anything in common. So now I'm being left with negative 9/4 as my final answer. Okay, so now just moving on right ahead. I forgot to mention from the previous example that for a problem like this, when you're going to be asked to explain, what you're going to want to write is it's one solution because, and then you're going to be given a box. You need to write why it's one solution. So you're going to prove there's actually one solution. How do you do that? By saying because x equals negative 9/4. There's only one solution. Now some of you may only put negative 9/4. Please make sure you write x equals to show that there is only one answer. Okay, so now let's go ahead and try number 3. For number 3, I'm noticing the first thing I can do is combine like terms. So let's do that off to the side real quick. Negative 1/3 minus 2. I need to make that into a fraction, so I'm just going to put it over 1. 3 is going to be my lowest common multiple. The first one's not going to change, but the second one we're going to have to change by a 3 to make it a 3. So we have negative 6. So leaving me with a total of negative 7/3. So we're just going to bring down the plus 1/2 equals negative 7/3 x plus 1/2. So notice here, I technically know what the answer is as of right now. I notice both sides are exactly the same, so I know it's going to be infinitely many solutions. But let's just go ahead and finish and isolate our variable to one side by adding 7/3 x to both sides, which leaves me with 1/2 equals 1/2. So when you pick your choice, you're obviously going to put infinitely many solutions, but at the end of your homework problem, you're going to be asked to justify why you think it's one solution. Why you think it's infinitely many solutions. So you're going to have to write it's infinitely many solutions. Why? Because, and in the box, you're going to have to type in because 1/2 equals 1/2. So you're proving it is a true statement. So you will be required to write that in to get full credit. Okay, so now once again, go ahead and pause the video and try number 4 by yourself. Okay, so for number 4, first thing you should have done is combine like terms. We have a negative 1/2, subtracting 4 to make it a fraction. We're just going to put it over 1. 2 is going to be my lowest common multiple. The first one's going to stay the same, but the second one we're going to have to change by 2. So we're going to subtract 4 times 2, which is 8, leaving me with negative 9/2. So here we have negative 9/2x plus 1/2 equals negative 2/5 x plus 3/5. I do have variables on both sides, and notice right here they're not the same, so automatically I know there's going to be one solution. So let me go ahead and isolate it to one side by adding 2/5 to both sides. Now let's do some side work. Negative 9/2 plus 1. plus 2/5. 10 is going to be my lowest common multiple. We're going to multiply by 5 here, so that leaves us negative 45. Here we're going to have to multiply by 2, leaving me with plus 4. Now be very careful, don't add those. We're going to find the difference, leaving us with negative 41 tenths. So now we have negative 41 tenths x plus 1/2 equals 3/5. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of my constant by subtracting 1/2 from both sides, leaving me with a negative 41 tenths x equals. Now here, let's go ahead and do some side work. Our lowest common multiple is 10. We're going to change this by 2, leaving us with 6. Change this by 5, leaving us with minus 5. So we end up with 1/10. Now we're not done. Again, you could divide by the coefficient, but we've learned something new. We can also multiply by the reciprocal of our coefficient. Notice with reciprocal, it doesn't change the sign at all, so we're still multiplying by a negative. I'm going to flip it over to 10 over 41. Notice the 10's cross cancels, the 41's cross cancel, and a negative times a negative is now positive, leaving me with just x on this side. I'm going to go ahead and multiply by 10 over 41 on this side as well. And it is negative. Don't forget about that. It's something a lot of students often forget. The 10's cross cancel, leaving me with just a negative 1 over 41. So that is our final answer. Okay, so now let's go on to number 5. So for number 5, the first thing I notice I can do is distribute. So I'm going to be left with 3/4 x. Distribute here, be negative 3/4 equals 3/4 x minus 1/3 minus 1/4. Now I'm noticing I can combine like terms. So negative 1/3 minus 1/4. 12 is going to be my lowest common multiple, so I'm going to multiply by 4 here. It's a negative 4 here. I'm going to have to multiply by 3, leaving me with minus 3. So now I'm left with negative 7/12. So here we have 3/4 x minus 3/4 equals 3/4 x minus 7/12. At this point, I know how many answers I have. Why? Because I'm noticing that the coefficients are the same, but the constants are different. So I know there's no solution, but let me further prove it by isolating my variable to one side. Oh, look, I noticed their variables are eliminated, leaving me with only negative 3/4 equals negative 7/12. So here I'm going to go ahead and say it's no solution. Because, and again, you're going to be asked to justify. How am I going to justify it? By saying negative 3/4 equals negative 7/12. This is the proof that I got to lead me to the conclusion that it is no solution. So that's what you're going to be doing differently this time. So now pause the video and try number 6 by yourself. Okay, so for number 6, the first thing I notice I can do is combine like terms. So I'm going to add 2/3 with 1/6. 6 is my lowest common multiple. We're going to multiply by 2 to change it to a denominator. So it's 4. This one's going to stay the same, so I leaves me with 5/6. So I have negative 1/2 x plus 5/6 equals, here I notice I can distribute, so I'm going to be left with 1/4 x. Distribute again, that's going to be plus 1. Now I notice I have variables on both sides. Immediately I can tell that there is one solution, so I'm going to go ahead and isolate my variable to one side. So now I'm going to be left with negative 1/2 minus 1/4. 4 is going to be my lowest common multiple, leaving me with negative 2. This one's not going to change, so it's going to be negative 3/4. I'll bring everything else down, so plus 5/6 equals 1. I'm going to get rid of my constant like I typically do, leaving me with negative 3/4 x equals, I can do this in my head, that's going to be a negative, oops, not negative, it's going to leave me with a 1/6. Now I'm going to multiply by the reciprocal of the coefficient. Please remember the coefficient doesn't change its sign, so it's still negative. So notice the 3's cancels out, the 4's cancels out, and a negative times a negative is a positive. Multiply this by negative 4/3 as well. We're going to cross reduce. This is 2, this becomes 3. So my answer is going to be negative 2/9. Okay, so again, please make sure for the justification in the box that you're saying it's because x equals negative 2/9. Okay, so now number 7, my last example before you try one by yourself again. So the very first thing I'm going to notice I can do on the left-hand side is I'm going to distribute. So I'm going to distribute, leaving me with 1/4 x. Distribute again, leaving me with, let's see, 1/2. Okay, so this one's going to stay the same. Now, what could I do? I see I can combine like terms, so let's do that off to the side. 5, 6 plus 1/4. 12 is my lowest common multiple. I can multiply by 2, leaving me with 10. I can multiply by 3, leaving me with 3, so I'm left with 13/12. So 13/12 x plus 1/2 equals 1/2 x plus 1/3. Immediately I know there is one solution. Why? Because my coefficients are different. Okay, so let me just continue by isolating my variable to one side, doing some side work. We're going to do 13/12 minus 1/2. 12 is going to be my lowest common multiple. This one's going to change by 6, leaving me with 7/12. So we have 7/12 x plus 1/2 equals 1/3. I'm going to isolate my constant over to one side by subtracting 1/2, leaving me with 7/12 x equals, more side work, 1/3 minus 1/2. The lowest common multiple is going to be a 6, so I'm going to have to multiply by 2 here, multiply by 3 here, leaving me with -1/6. Now, again, you can divide by the coefficient, or you can multiply by the reciprocal of the coefficient. 7's cross cancel, 12's cross cancel, leaving me with, let's see, we can cross cancel by 6, leaving me with the answer of -2/7. And that is our answer. Now for our very last one, go ahead and pause the video and try number 8 by yourself. So first things first, we're going to go ahead and distribute first. So when you distribute, that should leave you with 3/4 x. Distribute, that should leave you with 3 equals 3/4 x plus 5/3. Hopefully the next thing you want to do is combine like terms. So we're going to have a -5/6 plus 3/4. 12 is our lowest common multiple. So we're going to times 2, leaving us with -10. Here we're going to multiply by 3, leaving us with +9. So it's a -1/12. Be very careful that you include the negative. So we have -1/12 x plus 3 equals 3/4 x plus 5/3. Now at this stage, I do know there's going to be one solution because my coefficients are different. I'm going to subtract my variable to both sides so that I can isolate it over to the left. So now I have a -1/12 minus 3/4. 12 is my lowest common multiple. I'm going to have to change this by 3, leaving me with -10 over 12, which could be reduced to -5/6. So now we have -5/6 x plus 3 equals 5/3. We're going to go ahead and subtract our constant over, leaving us with 5/6 x equals, let's go ahead and do some side work here. 3 is my lowest common multiple. I'm going to multiply by 3 minus 9, so I have left with -4/3. But we're not done. We're going to get rid of this coefficient either by dividing or multiplying by the reciprocal. Yet again, please remember the sign doesn't change, so it's still negative, but now it's 6/5. So here the 6 cross cancels, the 5 cross cancel. I can cross reduce by 3, leaving me with a positive 8/5. Why positive? Because a negative times a negative is a positive. Well, guess what? That actually concludes the lesson for today. Thank you so much for tuning in, and as always, until next time, bye.